Hey everyone, Priv here, third year Canadian med student, and welcome to my med school vlog. What I've been trying to do is talk about a few things that I've been doing in the previous month that either kept me busy or is something new that I've been doing, and it's based on something that I heard in a podcast that I used to listen to, which I explained in the first episode. So you can go and watch that if you want to know more. But really, it's just a way for me to share a little bit about what I'm doing in my life. Some of the things I like to cover are books that I'm reading, exercises, podcasts, TV shows, essentially anything that is occupying my time right now. So let's get into it. Today I will be talking about two things that have kept me busy in the previous month. One is a book that I was reading. It's called A Litte Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So let's talk about that first. So this book is about four men, and we end up learning about who they are right now, and then also a little bit about their past lives before they were introduced in the book. And I believe it starts off when they were in about college, and it ends up spanning their entire lives. The way it was written was really interesting because although the book is based in New York, there's no mention of actual time. There's no social events, real world events that happen that let you know what year it is. And the only way you know is that throughout the book, they allude to the characters' ages in some way, shape, or form, either through the main characters or through someone else in the book. And I remember reading, I was going through it, and they would mention that, let's say for example, it was a character's 40th birthday. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I had no idea he had just skipped the last 5 years of his life. So it was quite interesting the way it was written. As you can tell, probably, I am not an expert book reviewer. Just a little side note, this is a very non-expert review of this book. So please don't judge me too hard on this. Okay, getting back to it. So we go through these characters' lives, and another part that was captivating was that it went into great detail about their occupations and what they were going through. So there were in-depth conversations about architecture, about law, about medicine, about art, and it was very captivating to me. Especially the medicine part of it, obviously, but also the other parts. It was really engaging, and the author obviously went to great depths to speak to people in those fields. So in terms of what people don't like in this book, I mentioned in my previous video that it is a little bit controversial, and the reason why is because there are so many serious themes. So the topics of suicide, mental illness, child abuse, physical abuse, loneliness, they're just right there up front and center. And the book wouldn't be what it is if it didn't talk about those things in such great detail. So a lot of people say that this book is just trauma porn. You don't have to go into that much detail about trauma in order to write a book, essentially. I can see that point of view. It's a hard read, I'm not gonna lie. There were times when I became very emotional based on what the character was experiencing, but also the book really forced you to look deep inside your own life and make comparisons, and it's tough. But in my mind, that's what makes someone a great author, to bring out those emotions in you, to bring out those feelings, those thoughts. That's something that I really appreciate in a book. So in terms of this book, did the author go beyond what she needed to in order to write this type of book? I don't think so. These are all topics and real world experiences for people. People go through sexual abuse, they go through physical abuse. People have traumatic life experiences in their childhood. We know them as adverse childhood events now that really shape who they are as adults and in their future life. Not talking about things like physical abuse doesn't mean that they don't happen. And to me, I don't think she was capitalizing on these things. Unfortunately, they happen in our lifetime, they happen in society, and too often people don't talk about them. So I actually think that she did a really good job at bringing it up and allowing people to have conversations about it. And there is an aspect of suspense to this book as well. There's 4 main characters, and the book does focus more so on a character named Jude. And Jude, we realize, has a past that he doesn't really like talking about. And we don't find that out until different parts of the book. We don't know a lot about his family, we don't know a lot about his upbringing, and he has some sort of physical disability that he doesn't really like to talk about. The author does a really good job of just sucking you in. I wanted to be there with him. I wanted to support him. I wanted to provide the character an outlet to speak about things that he didn't want to. And I know, like, obviously I can't do that. This is a book that I'm reading. But if an author can do that and make you feel those ways, I think for me, that's everything that I want in a book. So if that's something that you enjoy, if you want to read something that touches you, that makes you emotional, that really makes you analyze things in your life and society, then I think you'll really enjoy the book A Litte Life. There are a few quotes that I want to talk about, but then there's some themes that I want to talk about as well. And although a lot of this is related to the world of medicine, I really believe that no matter what field you're in or whatever you're doing in your life, this will make you think about some things, like it has done for me. It is morals that help us make the laws, but morals do not help us apply them. I don't even have to talk about why this is applicable right now and how this relates to what's going on with the current events in the world, but also the way the world runs in general. And when we think about the way that racism perpetuates the systems of this world, whether it's medicine and healthcare, which is something that is quite evident, but also, unfortunately, the justice system and the way laws are applied. And it makes you think, how are these decisions made? Why is it that there's certain populations, most often minorities, people who are more marginalized in society, why do they make up more of the population who is, let's say, in prison versus the amount of the population that they represent outside of that? And there's no doubt that the way that the world works, the way that the justice system works, there is a lot of bias and racism that runs through that. And this quote just really summed it up for me. Is there a place for ethics and morals in the justice system? There's obviously a place for right and wrong. There are laws that we reference, and they were made at some point, hopefully, with an underlying sense of ethical and moral conscience. But how are they applied? And is there a place for morals and ethics when you are applying those laws? If a law is not made with some sort of foundation of morality, then of course when you're applying it, it's just going to compound that disadvantage for people. I don't know. I'm not in law. I don't know the answer. I don't know how laws are made. I don't know how laws are applied, but I do know that often they are applied in an unjust fashion based on who a person is, how privileged they are, how powerful they are, which is very unfortunate. Loneliness is not hunger or deprivation or illness. It is not fatal. And a lot of people, I truly think, believe this. Loneliness is not fatal. It's not the end of the world. You don't need a big social circle around you. And a part of that is true. I linked a TED Talk in a previous video, which I'll link up here if you want to watch it, which talked about the importance of social connection. And this does speak to that. So there's 2 parts here. One is that loneliness in itself is not fatal, correct? But there are huge physical, emotional, spiritual benefits of having people around you, having social connections with others. And this has been proven in the research. This isn't something that I'm making up. But I think the second part is actually more important. I think there's a very big difference between being alone and being lonely. So these people are not necessarily alone. They may have friends, they may have family, but they're lonely. And to me, that's directly related to someone's mindset, and it's directly related to someone's mental health and well-being. It doesn't matter about what my relationship is with that person if deep inside within them, they are lonely. And when you come across people like this, you will recognize it. You may be out getting a drink with someone and it's just not the same as what it may be with other people. So I think this is a plea to all of you to really think about not only your interactions with other people, but your own interactions with yourself. It doesn't matter how many people you surround yourself with, but if you're not happy with the person who you are inside of yourself and you are feeling lonely, it is a hard road. This is an aside now from this book actually, but I think at that point, if you're feeling that way, you really need to reach out and seek help. And it kind of relates to the next quote that I wanted to talk about. In those months, I thought often of what I was trying to do, of how hard it is to keep alive someone who doesn't want to stay alive. I would rather have him suffering and alive than dead. It's really difficult to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. And that's kind of where this quote is getting at. How do you keep someone alive who doesn't necessarily want to stay alive? And is it your job to do so? For example, if I'm healthy and aware of what's going on, I feel that I have an obligation to do so. And that obligation stems from my relationship with whoever that is. This happens so often, and especially going through a psychiatry rotation, this comes up every single day. How do you help someone stay alive who doesn't want to stay alive? And it's related to the second quote, that is, that I would rather have him suffering and alive than dead. And the important part of this is that the author is talking about I. So the point of view is that I would rather have someone suffering and alive rather than dead. But it doesn't talk about what the other person wants. Who are you talking about? Would they rather be suffering and alive than dead? And I think it's really easy to say that suicide is wrong, someone shouldn't be killing themselves, but is it selfish to say that? Is that selfish for me to want someone to be suffering rather than them ending their suffering? The biggest thing for me is that if there is a way out of that, if that person can get help where they don't have to feel that way anymore. And if that is an option, then I don't think suicide is the right choice. Because that person there is a hope to be alive and not suffering. And that is always better than being dead. But what happens if there is no option other than to suffer? And this is kind of where MAID comes in, where that there is no future to have a life without suffering. But how does that work in terms of mental illness? I don't know. Again, I don't know the answers to these things. These are just thoughts that came up while I was reading this book. I don't want anyone to get mixed up here. I don't think suicide is inherently right, but I think there is an ethical and moral dilemma that is related to it, that is related to what that person is going through, but also what someone like me, an outsider, feels as well. But the flip side is that, is it selfish for me to take my point of view into account when it's someone else's life, when someone else is going through suffering? Yeah, it's hard, but what I can say is that without seeking out help to understand if that suffering has an end, then there's going to be so many unknowns. So if this is something that you are feeling, if you are feeling that you are alive and just suffering, I really do think it's important to reach out and get help, either through a professional or through people around you. Let someone know what you're feeling and what you're going through. What I'm going to do is just end the review part of the book right here. It is heavy, and even just talking about the book after I read it is bringing up those same emotions. Purposefully, I didn't make this video right after I finished the book. I did finish the book last month, but I wanted to give some time to just digest it and to not get too worked up or emotional while talking about it. But obviously, that's what a book like this does. Even just thinking about it and talking about the quotes that I highlighted, it does bring up those same thoughts and feelings for me. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I wanted to talk about two topics. The book I'm reading, A Litte Life, which I just did, and then also a form of exercise. But because I just talked about that book for probably way too long, which was not anticipated, I'm going to save the second topic for next month's video. Let's leave it there. Sorry for the heavy video. I'm hoping that it at least helped you to think about some things, or if it convinced you to read the book. I'm gonna leave it there. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see the rest of my journey through medical school. As always, I will see you in the next one, which will be 1 week from today. All right, take care.